Greetings Exiles, I'm CodRayZeal, and joining me today as always are Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III and Frank. Say hi guys.
Hi.
And today we're just going to be going over my lab farming Righteous Fire Juggernaut. Now this is a little bit more of a budget option compared to the ones that have been killing the Uber Elder recently. I think as far as farming the lab goes, this is probably the best build I've ever played for that reason. So let's get started by just going over the gear that I'm using. First of all, I'm using a Rimnor's Resolve Samite helmet. The reason for this is it gives us some fire damage, it gives us a decent amount of armour and life, all for a really low price, and it's easy to buy and organize. Next, I'm using a Rise of the Phoenix. This is just to, get that regen up and get a little extra fire resistance. You could also use Saffel's frame, but I feel for lab farming that Rise of the Phoenix is probably a great choice. My boots are standard movement speed, life and resist. And my gloves are Essence of Delirium crafted Legion gloves. I always start the league with Legion gloves because I know I can level a couple of characters with them as well. For my rings, I'm using Calm's signed coral rings. I would like to be using Calm's Way, and I am actually using Calm's Way, but for the purposes of making this a budget build guide, I put on the Calm sign and did a lab run just to make sure it was still as flowy, and it is. So 2 Calm signed coral rings will get you where you want to go. I just picked up any old marble amulet, scoured and elked and chaos, and the drill a couple of times with it just to get some life, some resists, and also some dexterity, because this build is severely lacking dexterity. For my belt, I just grabbed an elder leather belt and scoured and chaos and whatever it until I got life recovery rate and some life, and it's pretty much best in slot. Well, best in slot would be if it were corrupted with +1 endurance charge, but this is a budget build guide, so we're not doing that. Lastly, my weapon. Now, since Zizarin and Havoc have killed the Uber Elder with this build, weapons with elemental focus on them have become quite expensive. So I would recommend just buying some old Shaver Scepter and, alt-regaling for elemental focus. And then just crafting attack speed onto it. As for my flasks, I'm using a Blood of the Karui. This is just massive healing very quickly, followed by complete healing at the end of its duration. So pretty handy to have, especially when fighting Azara and you know when the damage is coming. I'm using a run-of-the-mill Quicksilver flask, more or less because, I don't know, I feel uncomfortable leaping or shield charging everywhere, and every now and then I just like to move where I'm going. Next, I'm using an Experimenter's Ruby Flask of Curing. The reason I'm using Curing is because poison is our greatest vulnerability. Next we have a Sulphur Flask with Immune to Curses. This is for those days when you got fonts and you just want to not worry about them. The Sulphur Flask can be cast 4 times, lasting almost 5 seconds each time, so you're more or less covered for the duration of an Azara fight. Lastly, I'm using Witchfire Brew. This gives us the Despair aura as well as a bit of extra damage over time. It also blinds Azara, so he hits us less. And lastly, I wanted to get one of these before I posted the build guide, because the aspect of the crab skill, these crab barriers, they give us 2% physical damage reduction each, and this disappears when you get hit by physical damage. But it doesn't disappear when you take physical damage over time. So this makes us extraordinarily tanky in terms of labyrinth traps, and it's a fantastic chest, gives us a lot of armor and a decent amount of life, and it's cheaper than a Count's Heart or a Belly of the Beast. It also gives us bleed immunity and a decent amount of life resists, the standard fare. definitely recommend this one. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let's just go over my skill gems and how I've socketed them. First of all, the important thing, Righteous Fire is in our gloves for the Delirium damage bonus, linked with Elemental Focus, Burning Damage, and Efficacy. Now the reason I've picked Efficacy is because that extra AoE you get from Endurance charges more than covers the area of effect, and you don't need to do that pointless swapping around of gems. Remember, the target here is killing Uber Izara quickly enough, and I believe that this gem setup achieves that. Next, in our boots, I've got an Orb of Storms setup with Arcane Surge, increased critical strikes, and increased duration. Now the reason for the Arcane Surge is so that I have enough mana regeneration to channel my Scorching Ray. And that pretty much sums it up. So you just level up Arcane Surge to around level 8, and that will trigger every time you cast Orb of Storms. In my helm, I've got Blood Rage. The reason I've got Blood Rage is because I got the crab barriers and I got the endurance charges, so the degen is really trivial, and you get that frenzy charge on kill and extra attack speed to move through the lab faster. Also in there I've got Summon Stone Golem, because regen, and then I've also linked in a reduced mana here because before I was using 3 purities, so I didn't have the mana to cast my golem without it. Now this is pretty much a useless link. You could even put a high level cast when damage taken in there and just not have to cast these skills. And then I've got Fortify in there. That's just to make the golem just that little bit more tanky. In my chest, I've actually got 3 skill gems and 2 support gems. And the skill gems are Vigilant Strike, which I link to faster attacks and Fortify. Now the reason I've got Vigilant Strike is because to fortify yourself with Vigilant Strike you don't need to move. You can shift click and make sure that you don't move, which is essential if you're using the Soul of Tukahama Pantheon power. I've also got my Leap Slam and Shield Charge in here, just for movement. And in the last socket I've got an Enduring Cry. This is just in case, you know, I'm running through the lab and nothing's hitting me, so I need to cast it manually. Lastly, in my shield I have Purity of Lightning, Purity of Fire, and Purity of Ice. Now, I alternated between Purity of Lightning and Purity of Ice for a while, but now I just use Purity of Lightning. And the reason for this is Aspect of the Crab costs 25 mana to reserve, and I found that it was more useful than using another Purity. And also the weapon swap, which is quite convenient. I've got 2 Elder bases with gain an endurance charge every 4 seconds while stationary. If you're not quite there yet and you need your endurance charges to be up for the Izara fight, you can stand outside, weapon swap, get your charges, and then swap back. So that's extremely convenient, and I highly recommend those in the weapon swaps if you don't want to use Bright Peak and whatnot. Okay, with that said, let's go over the passive tree briefly, starting with the Ascendancies and the order in which I picked them. First thing I grabbed was Unflinching, and the reason for this is, for some reason, leveling with endurance charges is great, especially if you have some Grand Spectrum Crimson Jewels and you've got a lot of armour. Then you don't take any damage and it just makes for a much more relaxing leveling experience. Next I picked up Unbreakable because I had a high amount of physical damage reduction, so I felt I could benefit from that 1.5% of total physical damage prevented from hits thingy. And it was true. The more things were hitting me, the more I'd regen, so I was pretty comfortable throughout the leveling process. After that I picked up the defensive endurance charge node, being Unrelenting. This was just to get that reduced elemental damage taken while at maximum endurance charges, just to make Righteous Fire feel a little bit more comfortable. And lastly, upon completing the Uber Labyrinth, I grabbed Unyielding. This is a great node now. It gives us some damage, it gives us some AoE, and you know, when you're shield charging it, sometimes you may actually even stun one of the lesser mobs and get your endurance charges going. Although that doesn't happen very often. Now the passive tree, you may notice a lot of weird, almost unnecessary things here, like versatility and precision, and I'm also grabbing a lot of resists. Now the reason for this is because this was my starting build, and I didn't want to focus on buying gear that had resistances on it. This just makes your entire setup a lot easier to get started. So it costs us some life and damage, but at the end of the day your build is ready for Uber Lab a lot sooner if you get nodes like this. So come out and grab some life and regen and more life, some armor, grabbing all the endurance charges that are easily available to me, as well as barbarism for that +1 max fire res. And then it's just a case of getting regen and life wherever I can find it, and also picking up elemental equilibrium and elemental overload. The full skill tree will be available in the path of building in the description, as well as a full overview of my gear. So as the first Righteous Fire build I've done of the 6 this league, I'm going to find this one pretty hard to top, because the new Juggernaut is just my playstyle. I love all that physical damage mitigation, and I love just relaxing through maps. And I highly recommend it for anyone who's looking for a tanky through standard gameplay thing. With that said, this build will struggle on things like the Shaper and the Elder and those elemental things, because, you know, our elemental damage mitigation is subpar. Because we have much less life than a lot of other Righteous Fire builds as well, we're purely focusing on mitigating Izara's damage here. And as you can see in this video, there's an elemental plus charges Izara, and I'm doing just fine. Once you get the Calm's Way coral rings, you do even more fine. So if you're looking for a stepping stone into one of these end game Righteous Fire builds, or if you just want to farm the Uber Lab, this is a great build for you. It's relaxing and it doesn't require a lot of fiddly mechanics like my Righteous Fire builds usually do. So with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching, and if you like this style of content or this style of build, then do like and subscribe and, you know, do all the usual things. And yeah, next up will be a Scorching Ray Totem and Righteous Fire Hierophant, which is also low life. So that should be coming shortly. And with that said, from myself, Sir Reginald Amadeus Fortescue III, and Frank, we'd like to thank you for watching, and good luck, and stay juicy. Just a final note about Pantheons. We have a lot of options available to us here. My favorite is Soul of Solaris. Make sure you've captured the Shadow of the Vaal for that reduced elemental damage taken. And this just protects us from a couple of slams and things, and just makes us take less damage overall. Another option here which will improve our regen slightly in combat is Soul of Arakali. Next up, for the minor gods, typically for Uber Lab and mapping, I use Soul of Tukohama. This gives us an extra 8% physical damage reduction, as well as giving us 2% regen, so that's really nice. However, since our greatest weakness is poison, Soul of Shikari can really help us in those high-end maps and specific guardians and bosses, with the Capture Terror of the Infinite Drifts. Now it's a tier 13 map boss, so it's not going to be easy to get, but that poison immunity will stifle one of our greatest weaknesses and is definitely a good choice because of that. Other options include Soul of Aberrath, just to improve our regen a bit more while we're moving. And that is about it.